Honorable members, I now put the question at order number 9, which is that this House adopts the report of the Public Debt and Privatization Committee on its consideration of the Consolidated Fund Services for the Supplementary Estimates 2 for year 2023-24 and the budget estimates for year 24-25 laid on the table of the House on Tuesday, 4th June 2024. As members of that opinion say aye. Aye. Will those of the contrary opinion say nay? No. The ayes have it. Honorable members, pursuant to the provisions of Section 40 of the Public Finance Management Act 2012 and Standing Orders 25A and 244C, I will now interrupt the business of the House to allow the Cabinet Secretary for the National Treasury and Economic Planning to make a public pronouncement on the budget highlights and revenue-raising measures for the national government for the financial year 2024-25 and the medium term. In accordance with the standing orders, I have also designated a suitable place in the chamber for the purpose. Honorable members, as I invite the Cabinet Secretary, I hasten to remind the House of the nature of today's event. First, the House will not make any decision on the pronouncement by the Cabinet Secretary. This is largely a ceremonial event. Members may wish to note that the House is still in the supply period, which commences with the consideration of the budget estimates and concludes with the enactment of an appropriation act. At present, the House has only considered and approved the budget estimates for the financial year 2024-25. As you are aware, the Appropriation Bill 2024 and the Finance Bill 2024, that is, the ways and means proposed to support the appropriations made by the House, will be considered at a later stage. Secondly, Order Kagombe. There was a lot of peace in the House yesterday. But you are welcome back to the House. Secondly, honorable members, I wish to allay the fears of a number of members who have approached me and raised concerns relating to the Finance Bill 2024. The House is not considering or voting on anything related to the Finance Bill today. Indeed, the bill is still undergoing public participation before the Departmental Committee on Finance and National Planning, and the committee is yet to table its report. Any concerns relating to the bill shall be adequately addressed by the House once the committee tables its report, hopefully in the next week. Thirdly, as stated earlier, the Cabinet Secretary is discharging a largely ceremonial function. Section 40 of the Public Finance Management 2012 requires the Cabinet Secretary to make a public pronouncement on the budget policy highlights and revenue-raising measures for the national government, taking into account international obligations entered into under the East African Community Treaty. As members are aware, partner states of the East African Community have a standing agreement to present and table budget statements to their respective parliaments every second Thursday of June, which is today. I hope the foregoing adequately clarifies the nature of today's event. And before I call the Cabinet Secretary, I wish to welcome our invited guests who comprise Cabinet Secretaries, Principal Secretaries, members of the Diplomatic Corps, and all other invited guests seated in the Speaker's row, diplomatic boxes, and the galleries. The Cabinet Secretary for the National Treasury, Professor Njuguna Ndungu, PhD, EGH, you may now proceed to the podium.
Mr. Speaker, it is my honor and privilege to present to honorable members of this august House and the people of Kenya the second budget of the Kenya Kwanza administration under the leadership of His Excellency Dr. William Samoei Ruto, the President of the Republic of Kenya and the Commander-in-Chief of the Defense Forces. This budget reaffirms the priority policies and strategies for achieving the bottom-up economic transformation agenda that is progressively improving the livelihoods of Kenyans. This statement is presented in the fulfillment of the requirements of Standing Order number 241 of the National Assembly and Section 40 of the Public Finance Management Act 2012 that requires that the Cabinet Secretary for the National Treasury to make a public pronouncement of the budget policy highlights and revenue-raising measures for the national government. Mr. Speaker, since 2020, our economy has been unwinding from the effects of negative and even persistent global and domestic shocks that have pushed the economy to its lowest activity level. These shocks include the COVID-19 pandemic, second, the global supply chain disruptions, third, the effects of climate change from prolonged drought in 2021 and 2022, and even the floods of 2023-2024. And measures to mitigate these negative shocks embarked on structural reforms under the bottom-up economic transformation have been successful in ameliorating these effects. The efforts have reduced the cost of living and created vibrancy in the economy that has shown signs of strong economic recovery. Mr. Speaker, in several regions, Kenya has sunk into abject poverty, largely because markets in their segments were interfered with or not properly governed. The failure to protect and regulate markets disrupted their development and, more importantly, curtailed further investment in those sectors such as coffee, sugar, cotton, pyrethrum. The institutional failure problem pushed policy to fail. In this context, the bottom-up economic transformation agenda interventions at the bottom of the pyramid are targeted to ensure that the markets are properly governed to work for everybody, and especially the poor. Mr. Speaker, for Kenya to transition from the middle-income status of the economy to an upper middle-income status as envisioned in the Kenya Vision 2030, two driving factors are important. That is, we must develop our human capital capability, and we have to increase production and productivity. Mr. Speaker, the Kenyan economy is susceptible to the ravaging impact of climate change, as demonstrated in the 2021-22 severest drought, which was more severe, which we haven't seen in the last 40 years, and the events of floods that have led to massive loss of property and life. The most important thing is that these shocks have shifted budgetary resources from economic activity to saving lives and rebuilding damaged infrastructure. And this calls for urgent and decisive interventions, especially to our supply side, which I will later address in this statement. Mr. Speaker, our fiscal policy is geared towards supporting bottom-up economic transformation agenda through continued implementation of a fiscal consolidation plan designed towards slowing down the growth of public debt without compromising economic growth. The fiscal consolidation efforts will continue to target domestic revenue mobilization and rationalization of spending through improved public financial management while reallocating resources in priority areas. Mr. Speaker, in this year's budget process, we accorded Kenyans an opportunity to share their views on how to address the economic challenges facing the country. Kenyans responded to our call and requested the government to address, through this budget, first, the devastating effects of the ongoing floods, second, taxation concerns and cost of living, third, the level of unemployment, Fourth, protection of the poor and the vulnerable. Fifth, reduction of wastage in public expenditures at the national and county governments level. Today, Mr. Speaker, I wish to assure Kenyans that we have listened to their concerns and we have spelled out measures to address through this budget. In this regard, the budget highlights and even the government's plan to strengthen the resilience of our economy to navigate the global turbulence, accelerate economic transformation, and decisively address the overarching developmental challenges in line with better bottom-up economic transformation agenda. It is in this context we have chosen the theme of this year's budget as sustaining the bottom-up economic transformation agenda, fiscal consolidation, and investing in climate change mitigation and adaptation for improved livelihoods. Mr. Speaker, it is now my privilege and honor to present the economic policy context of this budget. Thereafter, I will broadly outline the policy priorities and structural reforms underpinning the bottom-up economic transformation agenda. The proposed resource allocation as well as revenue-raising measures that the government will implement in the financial year 2024-2025 budget are going to be summarized. But, Mr. Speaker, we have to remember that we have one major problem that has three phases. This problem is as follows. There is increased demands for increased spending or expenditures from the government. That means that either we have to finance that through taxes or debt. The second dimension of this problem is that there is limitation and even constraints imposed in terms of public debt accumulation and even the debt carrying capacity of the economy. That, and more fundamentally, there are limitations in terms of mobilizing higher tax revenues, something that we have to remember, something that is quite critical from our side. Let me turn now to the economic policy context. Mr. Speaker, the financial year 2024-2025 budget has been developed against a backdrop of improved global economic outlook. The world economy stood at 3.2% in terms of growth in 2023 and is projected to continue at the same pace in 2024. In the domestic economy, Mr. Speaker, the Kenyan economy is now unwinding from layers of negative and persistent shocks. And some of these shocks have actually have been protected and have a structural and permanent effects on the economic activities. Mr. Speaker, through forecast interventions as well as structural reforms, the policies of Kenya Kwanza government have started to yield some positive results. Economic recovery is evident, with a GDP growth of 5.6% in 2023, up from 4.9% in 2022. This is above the global average and also above the average of sub-Saharan African region. The domestic growth in 2023 was mainly supported by a rebound in agricultural activities given the improved weather conditions and subsidized